In this explainer, we're going to dive into a really fascinating topic: the hidden structures that allow massive, decentralized, open source projects to work. I mean, these projects have contributors from all over the world, yet they manage to build some of the most important software out there. We're going to look past the code itself and really unpack the intricate social and political systems that make it all possible. Just think about it for a second. You have projects like the Linux kernel, which is probably running on a device near you right now, or the Apache web server, which powers a huge portion of the internet. These aren't built in some big corporate office. They're built by a global community of volunteers. There's no CEO, no formal management structure. So how on earth do they coordinate? How do they make decisions and actually get anything done? It kind of seems like it shouldn't work at all, right?
Now, you've probably heard some of the simple answers. Things like, oh, it's a meritocracy where only the best ideas win, or that everyone just cooperates. And, there's some truth to that, but it's really just scratching the surface. Those simple ideas don't explain how these projects handle the messy day-to-day work, or, more importantly, what happens when people disagree. And trust me, in any project full of passionate people, disagreements are going to happen. So we've got to dig a little deeper.
To really understand these projects, we need a better way to measure success than just saying, the code is good. Let's look at two really critical ideas. First, there's something called operational health. You can think of this like the project's metabolism. Is it able to smoothly take in new code contributions and, just as important, new developers? And second, there's survivability. This one asks a much tougher question. Could the project still go on if its founder or a few key developers just left? A project can have the most amazing code, but if it's not healthy and survivable, it's basically built on sand. This brings us to a concept with a pretty morbid name: the bus factor. It's this thought experiment that asks a simple question: how many key developers would have to get hit by a bus before the whole project grinds to a halt? Now, obviously we're not hoping for accidents, but it's a powerful way to think about risk. A low bus factor is a huge red flag. A high bus factor, on the other hand, means the project has strong survivability because knowledge and responsibility are spread out. So how do projects get that high bus factor? How do they become so resilient? The answer, believe it or not, comes down to one single, incredibly powerful concept. It's really the secret ingredient to the entire social fabric of open source, and that concept is forkability. Forkability is a very simple but totally profound idea. Because the source code is open, anyone at any time can take a complete copy of the project and just start their own new version of it. This is called a fork. And this isn't some abstract idea. It's a real, practical power that's built right into the open source licenses themselves. This analogy of a king and his kingdom is just a perfect way to grasp what's going on here. In a normal company, power flows from the top down, right? But in open source, a project leader isn't a king who owns the kingdom. If they start making bad decisions that the community hates, the developers, their subjects, can literally copy the entire kingdom and set up shop right next door. This completely flips the whole power dynamic on its head. And here is the really interesting part. It's a paradox. Actually forking a project is pretty rare because it can split the community and just creates a lot of extra work. But the constant possibility of a fork, the constant threat that it could happen, that's what really shapes behavior. It acts as this powerful check on authority. It forces leaders to try and build consensus and compromise because they know that if they become tyrants, the community can just walk away. Okay, so living with this constant threat of a fork, how do projects actually govern themselves? They need a way to make decisions without causing everyone to leave. And over time, a couple of common governance models have emerged. The first one, and probably the most well-known, is called the benevolent dictator. Now, that word dictator sounds pretty harsh, I know, but it's really a bit of a misnomer here. Because of forkability, this person doesn't have absolute power at all. A much better way to think of them is as a kind of final judge or an arbitrator whose authority is constantly being approved by the community. Their real job isn't to issue commands, but to guide the project.
So what does it take to be a good benevolent dictator? Well, it's actually less about being the most brilliant programmer and much more about having excellent judgment and people skills. A great one has a lot of self-restraint. They let the community debate and figure things out. They're good at recognizing a great idea, no matter who it comes from. And most importantly, they don't just make decisions on a whim. They really only step in to act as a tiebreaker when the community is truly stuck. The classic example here is Linus Torvalds with the Linux kernel. His authority doesn't come from a job title. It comes from decades of earning the community's respect. But that benevolent dictator model isn't the only way to do things. Not every project has a single obvious leader. And as projects get bigger and more mature, they often move toward a more distributed style of leadership. And that brings us to our second major model, the consensus-based democracy. So the difference between these two models is pretty clear. Instead of putting all the final authority in one person's hands, a democracy spreads that authority out across a group of trusted people. In this model, conflicts are resolved by the group reaching a consensus. And if that doesn't work, they have a formal voting process as a backup plan. You see this model a lot in big, established projects, like the ones at the Apache Software Foundation, where you have this large group of trusted, long-term contributors.
So what do we actually mean when we say consensus? Well, it doesn't mean that everyone is overjoyed with a decision. It just means that it's a decision that everyone can accept and live with. The way it works is often pretty informal. After some discussion, someone will kind of sum up what they think the agreement is. If nobody speaks up and objects, then consensus has been reached. In a lot of open source communities, silence really does imply consent. You might be wondering why this informal process doesn't just fall into chaos. A huge piece of the puzzle is the technology itself, specifically version control systems like Git. You can think of version control as a time machine for all the code. It keeps a perfect, detailed history of every single change, and it makes it incredibly easy to undo or revert any decision. This makes the stakes for any one decision much, much lower. If a change is made that people don't like, it's not the end of the world. It can be rolled back in a snap. But, of course, sometimes discussions just hit a wall. Consensus is impossible. When that happens, the project needs a way to break the deadlock so we can move forward. And that's where voting comes in. It's really treated as a last resort, only used after all the debate has been exhausted. Usually, a couple of trusted members will frame the options clearly, a formal public vote is held, and whatever the outcome is, that's accepted as the final word.
So who actually gets to vote? Well, it's not a free-for-all. The electorate is a specific group of trusted people, often called committers or maintainers. A committer is just someone who has earned the right to make direct changes or commits to the project's code. These are people who have built up a lot of respect in the community through their high-quality work and good judgment. And it's important to know this isn't always about coding. A committer might be someone who does amazing work on documentation or community organizing. This group of trusted voters usually adds new members after a private discussion and a vote among themselves. So, after all of this, after looking at forkability, benevolent dictators, and consensus-based bureaucracies, what's the big picture here? What's the main takeaway? It all boils down to this. A project structure is absolutely fundamental to its survival. This is the crucial point. Having brilliant code is fantastic, but it's not enough. A project can have the most elegant, efficient algorithms in the world, but if it doesn't have a healthy social foundation, clear ways to make decisions, resolve conflicts, and bring in new people, it might not survive for the long haul. As projects get more mature, they often write all these rules down. But this quote highlights something really important about that process. The written rules shouldn't be trying to create a new reality out of thin air. They should just be a description of the way the community already works. The document describes the culture, it doesn't invent it. So how do you make this social structure last? Well, first, you write down the rules, again, to reflect the culture, not to dictate it. Second, you have to treat that document as a living thing, something that can be changed as the community changes. And third, for a lot of projects, a really important step is to join a nonprofit umbrella organization, like the Apache Software Foundation or the Linux Foundation. These groups handle all the complicated legal and financial stuff, which lets the developers focus on what they do best, building great software. So ultimately, that's what this is really all about. Open source is just as much a social innovation as it is a technical one. The code is just the final product. The real engine is the human system underneath it all. The governance, the conflict resolution, the shared culture. That's the scaffolding that allows these amazing, self-organizing projects to thrive on a global scale. So this leaves us with one final, really important question to think about. In an open source project, what is the most valuable asset? The code can be copied, it can be forked, it can be changed by anybody at any time. But the community, that web of trust, that shared history, and those established ways of working together, that can't be copied. So while we often focus on the code, it's the community that is the truly irreplaceable part of the equation.